few minutes of breathing meditation just to calm the mind.
בבודה ובדרמה ובקהילה הלאומית, אבקש מקלט במערה, באמצעות המצבורים שיצרתי, להוסיף בודהיות אלוהי לצורים. בבודה ובדרמה ובקהילה הלאומית, אבקש מקלט במערה, באמצעות המצבורים שיצרתי, על ידי להוסיף בודהיות אלוהי לצורים. Sangye chodang soki chongnam la japchu bardu dagni pyapsuchi dagi chonyen kipe songnam ki tona penchir sangye lupasho. Journaling Bodhicitta, page 4, was in English and was in Tibetan. To accomplish my own and others' aims, I generate the mind seeking enlightenment. To accomplish my own and others' aims, I generate the mind seeking enlightenment. Dagdang shen don dukla du dagi janchu senkedo. Page 6 for imaginings. וכל בעלי התודעה יזכו באושר ובגורמי האושר. וכל בעלי התודעה יפרדו מסבל ובגורמי הסבל. וכל בעלי התודעה לעולם לא יפרדו מאושר ובכאב. וכל בעלי התודעה יפתחו מידת ההשתתפות ללא מוסר ובלי שתקשור ושתקשור.
go to the text that you all have, the textbook. Okay, so I'm just going to read the verses. Yes? Can you hear me? Did someone say no? Oh, I don't hear me. Okay, so I'm not going to read the commentary as I said, and there's also some things with the commentary regarding some of the translations. I find them a little unclear because I compared it with the Tibetan, and so you could read it on your own, but it's not easy. There's some parts in it that are they're very advanced, so it's not in the scope of this course. And really, Lama Tsongkhapa, Lama Tsongkhapa Nagarjuna actually, he composed these 12 verses on the 12 links, really in the context of realizing emptiness, which of course is very difficult. And so this is why there's some information here that relates to that, and it's not easy. But I try my best to just give you some idea of what the commentary is about, so that when you read it, you'll understand it. And some parts I need to leave out. But I'll read you the verses as far as we've gone yesterday, and then I'm going to continue on from where we got to yesterday. So it basically starts on page 536. So it says, the three kinds of actions that lead to rebirth, performed by one obscured by ignorance. So basically here it talks about the three kinds of actions. Well, there's different ways of looking at the three kinds of action. Basically, three kinds of action, and that's what it says down here, are actions of body, speech, and mind. That could be one way of looking at these three kinds of actions. So they refer to the second link. The second link being formative actions, or volitional action, or compositional action. It's the same translation for the same Tibetan word, druje gile. Yeah, druje, actually just druje, which kind of means compositional factor, or compositional action, sorry. Anyway, so three kinds, body, speech, and mind. So the stronger ones, as we heard yesterday, we talk about propelling karma. Of course, here it's propelling karma. A karma that propels us to be reborn in a certain state, in a certain realm. So it can either be virtuous or non-virtuous. Yeah, but it's actions of body, speech, and mind. Either one of the three, or all of them. Yeah. But basically, we talk about them being virtuous or non-virtuous, and the terminology that's used here is meritorious, non-meritorious, and then it also talks about unshakable actions. I haven't really talked so much about this, but it's really, when we talk about propelling karma, it's either virtuous or non-virtuous. And then virtuous karma can be divided again into two, or you could also say meritorious or unmeritorious karma. Yeah? So meritorious can be divided into two. Fluctuating and non-fluctuating, or shakeable and not shakeable. So what does that actually mean? It means that non-meritorious karma is shakeable, is fluctuable anyway. And then meritorious karma can be divided again into two, the one that's fluctuating and the one that isn't. So in other words, we talk about the 6 realms, but really it is the desire realm. There's the desire realm, so that has 6 realms. The desire realm, where you have the 3 lower realms, you have the human, and you have the 2 celestial realms. But then there's also the form and formless realm, which are part of the celestial realm, but they're not what is called the desire realm. Yeah, I mean, there's celestial realms because the types of suffering you find in the God realm, or in the human, the kind of suffering you find in the human, the animal, and so forth realm, you don't find there. So it's really like, if you look at the celestial realm, there's the desire celestial realm, which has the asura and shuras, like the half-gods or the semi-gods and the gods, you have those. And then you have a totally different class of, a different form of existence, which is called either the form or the formless realm. And you are reborn there. Of course, everywhere we're reborn has to do with our minds. So it's really the mind that we have at the time of death that is responsible for our rebirth. in the sense, of course, with the imprints that go along with that mind. But right now we have a very distracted mind. In the desire realm, so it's called the desire realm, the mind we have in the desire realm is usually very much attached and craves the objects of the five senses. Yeah, that's very much what defines us being a being of the desire realm. So, of course, the three lower realms, there's a lot of craving of the senses, of the sense objects, sight, sounds, and so forth. Then with the human realm, yeah, we can see that. We're very much controlled, very much driven by our attachment and craving for the objects of the five senses. Nice colors and shapes, nice sounds, and so forth. Tastes. And then the celestial realm, the desire celestial realm, is also very much driven by that. But there's beings who can, maybe as humans or, as celestial beings, start engaging in concentrative absorption, into states of absorption. I mean, into concentrating. They do concentrating meditation, right? Meditation of stabilizing the mind, such as we do here in the morning, like doing breathing meditation and so forth. But these meditations are intensified. So especially in the old days in India, the practice of these meditative states were very much emphasized. So people would just do stabilizing meditation to such a degree that they were able to reach karma binding, which means you can continuously for 4 hours focus the mind on just one object. And then they would continue on and deepen that concentration, seeing that as a means to overcome samsara. And so upon their death, depending on the states of concentration they had reached, they could be reborn in what is called the form realm, or if their states of meditation were even deeper, the formless realm. So form realm is called form realm because it doesn't have all the forms. There's sight and sound and, sight, sound, and tangibility, but there's no taste and there's no smell. It's free of those two senses.
Can you repeat it, please?
Yes.
Does it
Which one?
belong to the desire realm?
No, it's a little hard to actually explain it. Okay, so the way my mind works is with pictures. So this is why I find it easier. If I just give you a picture of this, then I hope it'll be easier to understand. So the desire realm, I think, is quite clear. So this is the desire realm, and you have those 5 realms, though you could subdivide it again into the asuras, the half, the semi-celestial beings, and the shuras, which are the actual celestial beings. So asuras and suras. Okay. And then, of course, you have the human realm, you have the animal realm, the preta realm, and the hell realm. So in the desire realm, you end up with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 6 states of existence, or you could just take this one as one existence and end up with 5. It's just a different way of counting. But then in the formless realm, you don't have any human realm, you don't have any animal realm, you don't have any preta or hell realm. So the only realm that if you were to talk about something similar to the desire realm, you would call that a celestial realm. Yeah? But it's the celestial realm, it's not the desire celestial realm, it is the form or formless celestial realm. Yeah? So it's different ways of looking at it. Just talking from a point of view of the desire realm, you talk of those 6, and then you talk of the form and formless realm, you talk of just this one, right? It's like a celestial being. If you talk of just celestial beings, you could talk about the desire celestial beings and the form and formless celestial beings. Yeah? So sometimes it's explained depending on the context. If you just talk about celestial being, you could talk about it in this context, the desire or form and formless realm. So there you take it from the perspective of celestial beings. If you take it from the point of view of the desire realm, well, this is what you have here, those 6 realms. So it's a little confusing because depending on how the person, whoever is doing the explanation in any of the scriptures, they talk about the celestial realms, they'd mention those 3, desire, form and formless realm. They talk about desire realm, they talk about those 6, and form and formless realm, it's not, separately in terms of the being anything but celestial realm. Does that make sense? Yeah. And actually, of course, as with anything, the mind, there being so many different levels of concentration, you end up with a form realm, you can have 17 different states. 17. So it's like different levels of concentration, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then with the formless realm, there's 3. So form realm means a state where you have 3 of the sense objects, which are sights, sounds, and tangible objects. You don't have taste, and you don't have smell. So it means you don't need to eat. That saves you a lot of time. Basically just, because of the concentration getting disrupted. So sights, sounds, and tangibility is there, but there's no smell and no taste. And so the concentration is such that beings are most of the time in that concentration. And there's 17 levels, and honestly, because it's not a state that's desirable from a Buddhist point of view, because of course we've seen this is really the best state, because you have a healthy amount of suffering and a healthy amount of happiness. Whereas these states of absorptions here are too deep, and people are not interested in anything but just this absorption. So therefore there's not that much description, what is the life of a form realm being like? What do they do in the morning? What do they do in the, there's not much description. Again, there's also not that much descriptions of those realms, but a little more. There's a little more of those. Just the sufferings of the jealousy of those beings, and the total enjoyment of those beings, that they're all born with bodies already at the age of 7, no slow kind of birth from womb, from a womb. They're born, they're not like fetuses and babies, but they're born. I don't want to be too loud, so otherwise. Okay, so they're born at states already at the age of 7, let's say 7 or 8. Here also you're spontaneously born, but it's not really described what you look like and what you do, but it's just these incredible minds or states of absorption. In the formless realm, you don't have any form. In the formless realm, any coarse form, any gross form, is just non-existent. Yeah? You still have the mind and the subtle energy wind that goes along with it, but of course that's more a tantric explanation. But really, in the formless realm, you have that energy wind that goes with the mind. But you don't have any gross form like we do. Yeah, it's just the mind, just meditating. Just basically floating wherever and meditating. So there's 4 states of those. Okay? So, yes, I hope this explanation helps. Yes.
All these descriptions are states of mind.
All these descriptions are states of mind, and because they're states of mind, there's usually a state of existence that goes along with it. So let's say, for example, Louisa was going to, in this lifetime, she starts meditating on, concentration. She would sit down and start doing these meditations and reached a very deep level of concentrative meditation. And she's not, let's say she was not aiming for enlightenment and so forth, because that's also a decisive factor which determines where you're going to be reborn. She may be aiming for rebirth in one of those realms. And you know, in ancient India, many of the meditators knew about these states and were hoping to be reborn there. And then just before, and we talk about this today, as in like what happens just before we die. You know, what is it that happens that a certain karma is ripened? And if in this lifetime she's accumulated the karma, a propelling karma to be reborn here, which is very likely for her to accumulate this karma because she's been doing the practice. Moreover, she's wishing to be reborn there. So the power of the mind is not to be underestimated. Even you wishing for something to be reborn in such a state can serve to become a propelling karma. So let's say, you know, she's done that, she's done the practices, and she's wishing to be reborn somewhere here. Then when she passes away, she'll be actually reborn there. Her mind that is already kind of in harmony with the states of mind here is not, I mean, first she had to practice these states, and she had a body, a coarse body like we do right now. Yeah, even though she reached already a mind that is concordant with the mind in this state, well, she's not going to commit suicide, right? I mean, she's still got that body, as long as the propelling karma keeps her in that body. And when the propelling karma is exhausted at the time of her death, then she would, through her meditation, she would probably sit down just before, you know, her time has come. She's made those prayers already to be reborn there. And then her consciousness is actually physically, well, it actually enters a physical basis in the case of the form realm, right? A form body, a form realm body. Or if her meditation is so deep, she'd be reborn in the formless realm. She wouldn't even have a body. But her mind would abide in a state that is in accordance with what is called the formless realm. So any state in samsara, right? You're in one of those, or you're in one of those states. So your mind, at the time of death, is kind of already in that, already concordant with that, and then you actually take rebirth there.
Can the mind exist without the body?
Well, yes, in the formless realm. But then you still call it the existence in a realm, because your mind exists in some, you see, we talk about samsara as a state of having aggregates which are under the control of delusion and karma. So samsara, what is samsara? What is cyclic existence? Actually, this is what Keter Rishi says, samsara are your aggregates. That's samsara. There's no place. There's no external place. I mean, it comes along with a place, but really most important are the aggregates. So the aggregates are cyclic existence. And these keep taking rebirth. And there's only so many states you can take rebirth in samsara. So aggregates that are propelled or controlled by delusions and karma. So these aggregates you can only take on in those states. So there's even the state where you don't have a body, but you would still say it's samsara because you are born in this state and you die under the control of delusions and karma. So even if Louisa had reached these incredible states of meditation, which has a Buddhist or absorption, which as a Buddhist practitioner would be so valuable, but if somehow she was not interested in liberation, is not, kind of totally leaving samsara or becoming a Buddha, then she'd probably be aiming for those states, knowing about them. People know about these states, so aiming for those. So it's still the mind of ignorance, the unawareness, the mind that grasps its inherent existence is still very much active. Yeah, it's still, even though she has this incredible state of concentration, but the unawareness is still active. So therefore, when she's reborn, the karma she's accumulated by doing these incredible states of concentration, that is responsible, but it's really the unawareness, of course, that's always present, that's also responsible to be reborn. Yeah? So she'd be reborn under the control, basically, of ignorance or unawareness. So that's still a samsaric state. Yeah? And of course, there is karma that she's accumulated, propelling karma to be reborn there. And then she's reborn there, and she'll also leave that state, die in that state, under the control of ignorance. So only when overcoming ignorance can you kind of totally make sure in your next life you won't be reborn there. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is really, I hope this serves as well, for now, an explanation in terms of like these are the different realms that you can be reborn in. When you look at the 12, the Wheel of Life, the explanation you find there with the 5 realms, the 6 realms or the 5 realms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So there's 6 there. I can see 6. So then the highest one also includes this one, the one at the top. See when you see the circle, the one just underneath the teeth of the being that holds the wheel. So there's the 12 rings at the outer rim, and then one rim inside there is like pictures of the 6 realms, different sections. And the one that's at the very top there, that refers to this Sura realm, the highest of the desire celestial realm, but at the same time also implies the Soul and Formless realm, which is also a celestial realm. Does this make sense?
Yeah. In this formless realm, we cannot attain enlightenment. We cannot, only in the human realm.
In the formless realm, you can attain liberation. There is explanation, and this goes into what is called the 20 Sanghas. There's a whole subject on the 20 Sanghas that we study when we study the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So there's some explanations where people on the path to liberation, Hinayana practitioners who only aim for self-liberation and nirvana, they kind of, they don't want to just be reborn in the formless realm for good, but actually their final aim is self-liberation. So it's just due to their minds. This is what's appropriate for them. So they aim for those births as like a last stage before attaining nirvana, or even before that. So there is, people are so different. Everyone is so different. So some people want to do it in the desire realm, some in the form, some in the formless realms. So that's with respect to beings who aim for self-liberation. Now for Buddhas, for full enlightenment, you become a bodhisattva before that. And as a bodhisattva, you want to be around and help people as much as you can. So then in the formless realm, what are you going to do, right? A bodhisattva can be reborn in the formless realm, but if you can't speak to people, you can't teach them, you can't assist them, you basically can't really communicate with people. So the formless realm is not such a good idea. But the form realm, they could take rebirth in, of course, to teach the beings who are there, right? Who are kind of there for a long time. Hey, come on, there's more to be done. You have already this state of concentration, but, move on from there and kind of try and inspire them. So they'd be found in all these states, but formless realm, I think, is a little difficult. Why would they go there, right? They could communicate in another way, but they wouldn't have to be reborn there, right? Through other means, but it's really in order to benefit sentient beings. Yeah. So you can be reborn in those states, but only as a temporary kind of solution. Whereas if you're not aware of self-liberation, you're not aware of full enlightenment, then, sounds great. And a lot of people feel in the days, like in India, it's so important to understand what was happening in India at the time. As I said previously, not just philosophically were they very much prepared, but they were incredible meditators. A lot of the Indian philosophers at the time, they tried to reach these states, and they thought these states were moksha, or self-liberation. And then the Buddha was saying, no, bad news. These are just still temporary. Temporary. You can still be reborn in another state. Okay? So this is amazing what you can reach, and I don't think 21st century Western world is really aiming for that. But there were times in the past that people were seriously doing those meditations.
There are Jewish practitioners who...
There you go. There's Jewish practitioners who aim for very settled states of concentration, I suppose, and then they be reborn in, those states. Okay. Is this enough? Is this sufficient, or do you have any more questions? No. Okay, so basically, those states, the desire realm states, if it's the three that are positive, they're called it's the meritorious karma that's responsible for them. And if it's the one that are negative, the three lower realms, it's the non-meritorious propelling karma that's responsible. But for the form and formless realm, it's a meritorious karma, but moreover, it's called a non-fluctuating karma, or a non-shakeable karma. Which means that if we have accumulated a propelling karma for, let's say, a human, ashura, a celestial realm, a human realm, any of those two, or if you divide it into three, two celestial realms and the human realm, if you accumulated one of those karmas, the karma itself can slightly change. Which means that, let's say, you have accumulated the propelling karma to be reborn as a certain type of asura. I don't know the types. It's not really described. Or a certain type of human being. And there's different worlds. It's not just this globe here. There's other worlds. If you've accumulated the karma to be reborn as a human being in this world, it could slightly change, and you will be reborn as a human in a different world. That is still the propelling karma doing that. The example that's usually given in the scriptures is that of an animal. If you have accumulated the karma to be reborn as a wolf, it could change for you to be reborn as a dog. This is the example that's classically in the scriptures. So the propelling karma, due to certain circumstances, and no one is really clear what they are, it can fluctuate, it can slightly change. So wolf and dog are pretty similar. So the propelling karma, their way of behavior, their way of doing things is very similar. And as we've heard previously, let's say you live your life a bit like, some of the quality, like a dog, I'm talking about, this is not really trying to put dogs down, but seriously, there are terms of like sexual behavior, for example, one to the next, and you should see in Dharamsala what's happening when the dogs are in heat. Boy, there's bleeding male dogs all over the place, they're really fighting for these dogs on heat. And it's serious business. So this kind of dog-like behavior, if one manifests that in this lifetime, one already is in danger of accumulating that kind of propelling karma that is in accordance with the state of being born as a dog. But it could also slightly change that propelling karma, during the time of your life, through other circumstances. It could change into a propelling karma that propels you to be born as a wolf. So there's slight changes possible. So that's in terms of any propelling karma that's associated with the desire realm. But karma that's associated with being born in the form or formless realm is called non-fluctuating. It's like this state of absorption, you've concentrated on that, and this is where you're going to be reborn. The realm or the state, I said form realm has 17 different states. So there's basically 17 different minds. So whatever mind, whatever state of absorption that you have reached accords with one of those 17 of the form realm, or one of the 4 of the formless realm. There's no there's no change, there's no shakeable, there's no fluctuation, if you like. So therefore, we talk about 3 types of karma: meritorious, non-meritorious, and then actually meritorious can be divided into fluctuating and non-fluctuating. Fluctuating refers to the karma of the desire, higher desire realm birth, and non-fluctuating refers to the meritorious karma of the form and formless realm.
Fluctuating only refers to meritorious, and we can't talk about the dog and the wolf because it's not meritorious.
No. Fluctuating is, all the desire realm karmas are fluctuating.
Mm-hmm.
So then we don't have to divide the non-meritorious karma in fluctuating and non-fluctuating. It's fluctuating anyway. But the meritorious has 2 divisions of fluctuating, non-fluctuating. Yes.
You're mentioning 17 levels of concentration. I know the division of 9 levels for single point meditation. This is something different or different?
You see, these concentrative states that you need to reach in order to be born in the form of formless realms, they take as a given that you reach karma abiding.
Oh.
Right? Karma abiding means the state that you attain where you can stay in continuous concentration with a very alert mind for 4 hours. Yeah, that is karma abiding. So then, from those 4 hours, you can deepen it and deepen it. I mean, 4 hours, you can do it a day, you can do it, 24 hours, you can do it, month on end. And every time you deepen your concentration. But the 9 states that you were referring to are the 9 states that you need to actually reach karma abiding first. Yeah? So there are 9 states to reach karma abiding, and then once you've reached karma abiding, then you need to deepen that even further. And there's 17 states in terms of the form realm, and then 4 in terms of the formless realm.
The 9 stages are not leading to shamatha?
Yes, they're the ones
Karma
leading
abiding.
to karma abiding shamatha.
Shamatha.
Yeah, and that
And
shamatha.
it's single body meditation? It's not for eons that they can be in concentration? So how is it called?
Okay, first you do the stages, you go through the first stages of gaining shamatha or karma abiding. And then once you reach karma abiding, 4 hours you can do it.
Okay.
But in order to be born in the form or formless realm, you need to be able to do it longer. That's just the beginner. It's just the beginning, it's nothing. In terms of, like a serious shamatha practitioner who wants to be born in the form of formless realm, 4 hours is candies, it's nothing, right? So then the person would continue to lengthen that, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. And then I don't know exactly, it must be somewhere in the scriptures where you can, what is the criteria for you to accumulate the karma to be born in the first state of the form realm? It may be days. Yeah. And once you're born there, you stay in that state for a long time, maybe for thousands of years or eons, right? But you come sometimes out of the meditation. It doesn't mean you can stay for eons in that meditation. You come out, you go in again, you come out, you go in. That's basically your life in those form realms. People are just very, very, very focused. And then you deepen it, and you deepen it, and you deepen it. You can go deeper and deeper and reach other levels of those form or formless realm until you reach the highest, which is called peak of cyclic existence. Peak of cyclic existence, as it tells you, there's no higher that you can go. Yeah, that's the 4th of the formless realm states, peak of cyclic existence. And there you reach amazing states of concentrations. And there you can stay for, I guess, for years, for possibly eons. But, you're reborn there, that's it. You just concentrate for how many eons it takes. And then when the karma is exhausted, you die and you're reborn somewhere else. Right? And that's it. And what a life. Not much time for practice. Yeah, I mean, concentration, yes, but does that make sense? Okay. Anyway, it's not really discussed because people go, that's not where you're going to go, so don't even worry about it. Sure, this is enough for the scope of this course here, but usually it's not like we learn much about it because it's not where we're heading. Human is the one we want to be reborn in. Yeah.
I understand asuras help human beings.
Asuras help human beings.
Suras.
Suras. I mean, Suras can be helping, like when we talk about Indra, Brahma, and so forth. I mean, there's a connection between human beings. I mean, human beings can actually make a connection with those beings in the God realm, right? Brahma is actually associated with the form realm. Okay? There's certain gods that are actually associated with the form realm, and even there, you can have contact because these beings have clairvoyance. It's not actually such a big deal to have clairvoyance. Even they say, in some scriptures, you find that when we die and we are reborn, just before we're reborn and we're in this intermediate state, we can see what we've been for many lifetimes before. So it's really like we can actually know where we're going to be reborn, what we were in the past. But we forget. We forget. Once we're reborn, this mind disintegrates again, it disappears, and we don't know. But these states, we're in the celestial realms, they have incredible clairvoyance. They can communicate with us in very special ways. This is why there's no problem with asserting the gods, God or gods that are asserted in other religions. But they say these are not permanent. They're not going to be there forever. But let's say they stay there for 1,000,000 years. They can stay in those states for 1,000,000 years. And sometimes there's even explanations where they say they think they've created the world. I mean, anyway, never mind. I mean, I don't want to go here into any kind of explaining other religions on the basis of this. But I've definitely seen explanations where Brahma, Brahma, it's like, you see, this globe was not always inhabited. It was not always inhabited. So there were times when it came into existence, and then slowly it was inhabitable. And then beings from different globes would take rebirth here. Millions and trillions, billions of years ago, however long that was. But they first took rebirth in the God realm, in the celestial realm. And there's an explanation. The first being that was reborn here thought he created the world. And kind of had that, and that was, sometimes they say it was Brahma, and they give the name Brahma, thinking that he created this world. And then other beings were created. So he was still thinking, I created this world. And because of the karma in that realm, staying there for so long, he may stay there for, I guess it's a male, I guess, yeah. So he stayed there for millions and billions of years. And in the meantime, people are born and reborn, but this being keeps thinking he has created the world. And still having miraculous powers, they can still communicate with humans. Yeah? They can communicate with beings on different levels. This is kind of the explanation that's given. It's to be investigated. Who knows? But I know, for example, in Ladakh, people very much have a very strong relation to spirits. And they make their own spirits very powerful. They make them powerful because they make them offerings, and they have an altar for the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, for the Triple Gem, and they have an altar for the spirits. So these spirits can be asuras, I guess they could be pretas, yeah, and they have a lot of power. So people being possessed by these beings, it's possible. I mean, I had a friend who, she had such a problem with this being affected, not possessed, but affected by this spirit. Because when she left Ladakh and she came to Dharamsala, she was very unhappy. So their house spirit tried to protect her and, tried to get her back to Ladakh because, not understanding what was going on. So this is how the story goes. I mean, this is how she told me herself. She had visions, she had funny dreams. And then she went to this really high Lama and said, I'm having this problem. And he did some divination, and he said, that's your spirit. That's the spirit at home. He's kind of taking care of you, just understanding that, you have a strong relationship because of the karmic connection they developed by making offerings and so forth, and it's now just wanting you to protect, and you need to show the spirit that this is not what you want. You don't want to go back to Ladakh. You want to be here as a nun and study and so forth. So he said, go somewhere where no one can hear you. Because he said, don't want other people to kind of talk to someone. And talk to the spirit loudly. Just say, I'm okay here, don't worry about me, make some offerings and say, I'm fine. And that's apparently what she did. She went to a forest, she talked to the spirit, it was all around, and then from then on, she didn't have problems. I don't know. But this is, and it makes sense. It does make sense, but it's hard for us to really, kind of believe that. But how can we say that just because we don't see it, there's no other beings around us, right? Anyway. Yeah, so we can make a connection with these spirits, and you see, this spirit here, of course, not understanding the full, purpose of this, but it was able to, connect with her. And likewise, if we make a connection, if we connect to those, we can actually receive help and harm. I mean, depending on what it is. So we need to make sure not to connect with something harmful. This is why there's so much controversy about a certain being that can be harmful, where there's in Tibetan Buddhism. Those who know about it, they understand what I'm saying. Those who don't, I don't need to explain it. But there's definitely there's definitely spirits or beings that can be dangerous to us. The being I'm talking about? I don't think so. It's not in this realm, but I don't know exactly where it is. I don't want to say much more. But anyway, so there is definitely beings that can benefit or harm us both. So better just to stay away. So when people are doing these seances, I think it's very dangerous. Like these seances, can be very dangerous. You can tap into spirits that can, or even asuras or whatever, that can be harmful. They're not all good guys. Okay, anyway, let's not get into that too much.
What is the form? Is it totally different from the other forms we know here in this study?
Well, it definitely doesn't have taste and smell.
Yes, they look like us.
That's what I don't know. This is what not really is described. I suppose, but I'm not sure. I mean, who's to say that even humans in different globes look the same as us? We kind of assume, but don't necessarily have to look like us, right? I mean, it's so hard to tell. There's definitely life on other planets, right? In different worlds, and there's humans there too. But are they exactly like us? Who knows? Yeah, I don't know. Yes.
About realizing emptiness.
Yeah.
I don't understand the connection. I mean, this formless, this
Form and formless realm, yeah. In
yes,
Josiah realm.
and they cannot realize emptiness.
They can, but it's harder. It's harder. You know, once you're in that, if you have so much concentration, so much absorption, you're so attached to this absorption. You don't want to sit down and reflect on emptiness. Absorption is not enough to realize emptiness. Concentrative states, they're just tools to benefit you, but they're not enough.
So just a human being can.
No, other beings too. Other beings too, they can realize emptiness, but it's much harder. I'm just talking in general. For humans, it's easier. Right? It's easier because of the right amount of suffering, the right amount of, because just realizing emptiness is not enough. You must develop renunciation, you must develop other states too. It's like the two wings of a bird, right? Having a loving mind, having a compassionate mind, that assists the wisdom of emptiness. You cannot realize emptiness by just thinking about it all the time. You must assist it with the accumulation of positive karma. And compassion, how do you accumulate compassion? By understanding what suffering is, firsthand. That's the best way. Okay? Alright, but let's get back because we need to finish quite a bit. Alright, so the three kinds of actions that lead to rebirth, performed by one obscured by ignorance. So you have the three types of propelling karma, either meritorious, non-meritorious, or fluctuating, or you have actions of body, speech, and mind, which are of course all led or all actually induced by ignorance. And the karma, so these three actions are the karma that impel one to further transmigration. So they are responsible for us to be reborn somewhere. And this karma is not accumulated intentionally. So this is what the commentary says, that the person doesn't want to be necessarily reborn somewhere, but unintentionally they may accumulate all this propelling karma and be reborn in a certain state. Then it goes on to say in verse number 2, having action as its conditions, consciousness enters transmigration. So here doesn't talk about causal consciousness and resultant consciousness as we've seen yesterday, but it does further down. Yeah? So the causal consciousness is within this lifetime still. The karma is left as a carrier on that causal consciousness. And then let's say, in the example of the 12 links in the order that we've done it, then you have, you're reborn in another state, not due to the karma you have left on your consciousness. Remember the difference? Yeah, we had the karma of a human that is left on the consciousness, and then I'm born as the poodle, coming from a different consciousness, coming from a different karma. And so now I'm reborn with the resultant consciousness now, being called the resultant consciousness, because it is the continuation of that consciousness from the life before. I'm now born in this state. So having action as its condition, consciousness enters transmigration. Once consciousness has entered transmigration, name and form come to be. Okay. So name and form come to be. Okay. All right, so this is how far we got. So what is the next step? Now we come to the 6 sense spheres. Why are we talking about this? Again, as I said, these 12 links are not so neat. I mean, it's like you need to change your direction all the time. First, the direction are action left on consciousness, or the ignorance action on consciousness. Consciousness is reborn somewhere. You then take on a name and form. You have the mind, and now you have the body of an embryo, for example. It's all taking place in the womb now. And then what we need, because we're really basically talking about a being in the desire realm. We're talking about a human, in a way, or an animal, something that we can identify with. It'll be slightly different when we talked about the form and formless realm. But we don't need to look at this right now, because that's not what we're aiming for. We know you'll probably be reborn again, yeah, and so therefore, let's say as a human, or that's kind of the states that we're aiming for. So in this case, I used the example as a poodle just for the sake of clarity, but it's the same procedure. So you're reborn, you're in the womb, and now you have name and form, but you still don't have the 6 senses. And this is very obvious when we look at the stages of a baby in the womb. In the beginning, of course, there's no eyes, no ears, no nose, and so forth. So the 6 senses, the 6 sense spheres, refers to the physical basis. The eyes, the ears, the nose, everything we need to actually experience the 5 senses. So where does this take us now? Now the emphasis is away from consciousness and carrier consciousness. It explains us the importance of having certain conditions to be able to perceive the 5 sense objects. We're in the desire realm. All our behavior is very much governed by the 5 sense objects. Yeah, I mean, basically, even mentally, we keep reflecting upon them. Beautiful sights, beautiful colors, beautiful shapes. I mean, we have desire for a person because of their body, right? Because of what they look like. We have desire for the person because of the things they say to us. Because the way they hold us. This is tangible objects. Their smell. Very important, apparently. Yeah, something a lot happening. We may not be aware of it, but the smell of a person, I mean, they've done some research that that the person had 5 T-shirts of men that had worn those for 5 days, and they smelled on those shirts, and they could say which smell they liked the most. And then they showed them pictures of those men without knowing their smell, and they always picked the same. So there wasn't just the sight and there wasn't just the outside of them. There was also a smell that we react to, but we're not aware of it. Yeah. So we're attracted by a person's smell, even though we can't really tell the smell. I mean, it doesn't have to be like they have to be smelly or something, right? Okay. Anyway, so this is like we think we like them for whatever reason we think, but really there's so much on a subconscious level, even the smell, right, that we kind of feel attracted to. And of course, smell and taste are very much related. It's the same molecules that enter our nose, well, we don't really taste people, but still it's related to the smell. So anyway, it's really the 5 sense objects that determine our feeling towards people. So, how do we get in touch with the 5 sense objects? What do we need to do so? And this is where this is leading us. Okay, this is a very important explanation. So those of you who studied Lorik, they may know. But for the rest of you, I need to do another drawing. Lorik is just the explanation of mind in Tibetan Buddhism, Lorik, mind and awareness. It's a very important subject. So if you study the 5 links, we don't need to give the explanation that I give you now, because we've studied this already. But this is very important, so just bear with me. Where's the right thing? Okay, so we have the 5 sense objects, right? So the five consciousnesses. So let's just take the first consciousness. Usually we count them in terms of eye consciousness is kind of the highest up. Eye here, ears here, nose here, tongue here, body here, and then mental consciousness. Of course, the body actually encompasses everything. But that's why we start with the eye consciousness, because it's the highest up here. And the mental consciousness is mentioned last. Anyway, so the eye consciousness. How does an eye consciousness actually arise? What do you need for an eye consciousness to arise? You need 3 things. 3 things. Okay, so this is the eye consciousness. So for an eye consciousness to arise, you need 3 things. Number 1, well, you need a sight. You need an object. Okay, it's sometimes called the observed object condition. So just if you get the terminology right, I don't think there's any fault. So it's a little complicated, but at least you know the terminology. So the observed object condition is what? shape and color. This is really what our eyes see. Shape and color. Okay, that's the observed object condition. And number two is for the eye consciousness to rise. Number two, we need an eye, and not just an eye. Here the Buddha talks about a very special form. And scientists, of course, nowadays know just having an eye doesn't mean you can see things. You need an optical nerve, you need part of the brain, you know. So this is called the eye sense sphere. The eye sense sphere, or eye sense source. There's different words for it. Eye sense sphere, or sometimes instead of sphere, they say source. The eye source, the eye sphere, the eye sense sphere, in a different translation for it. But it's basically just saying all you need, on the physical level that you need to actually be able to see. That is called, oh sorry, I forgot to give the name. That's the empowering condition. I write it underneath actually. So it's the empowering, I hope you can read my writing. Empowering condition. Okay? The empowering condition refers to this. Observed object condition is the shape and color. It's the object out there. The empowering condition refers to the eye sense sphere. But that's still not enough. You need one more thing. Which is called the immediately preceding condition. Which is a former moment of consciousness. Or an immediately preceding moment of consciousness. Consciousness, this is what the word means. So, immediately preceding condition. So in other words, and this explains the importance of mind, of course. Let's say you're in the womb right now. If you're in the womb right now, there's observed object conditions, there's shapes and colors, even in the womb. You know, it's not all dark all the time, I suppose. And then there's, of course, an immediately preceding, there's consciousness, there's a mental consciousness already there. That was there right from the beginning. The mental consciousness is what we took from us from a previous life. That is already there. But this is not ready yet. This takes the longest to get ready. This was there always. This is the immediately preceding condition, also always there. But there's sometimes when this is not developed yet. And the first time this is developed, then those three coming together, you have contact. Contact between those three. And you can then have an eye consciousness, of course. Right? So this is why the next link of the 12 links after name and form is the 6 sense spheres. Right? Because this you had, now this needs to develop. Okay? So you need to have an eye, of course, to be able to see the world. And this is kind of the sequence. You have a mental consciousness, you even have a body, even though it's just a piece of cells, you know, accumulation. And then the cells change, and the cells, you know, you look like a fish, you look like a pig, you know, so these stages you go through, and eventually, you know, the different senses arise. So for the eye consciousness, we just took the eye consciousness as the example. You have the empowering condition, you have the observed object condition, you have the immediately preceding condition, and then the eye sense power is ready at some point. So when all three are present, you can have them getting together. You have contact. That is the next link. You have contact. And with contact, you have feeling. And feeling is so important. That's why of the 5 aggregates, we've also filtered out feeling. Because in the desire realm, we crave the sense objects, but really, it's really how they make us feel. You know, that's what we crave. So if the person that looks beautiful makes us feel good, well then, it's really the feeling we crave. And we crave the person because we crave the feeling associated with them. Yeah? So we do say, as a desire realm being, we crave the 5 sense objects. But really, why do we do? Because they make us feel in a certain way. And that's really what we crave. It's the good feeling. The better the feeling, the more we crave it. the more intense the pleasurable feeling, the more we're attached. Okay? The more intense the displeasurable feeling, the more we want to be separated from it. There's attachment to the separation. It's because of attachment to the I, we want to be separated from those objects. Okay? Those feelings, those displeasurable feelings. So this is very important. So you see, we've moved away from the consciousness and the karma as a carrier. Now we're looking at it slightly from a different perspective. Okay, now we're reborn in a state, and in this state we're bound to have those senses at some point. And then that leads to an I consciousness, which leads to, well, it leads to contact basically. Contact, those coming together, and then them coming together, there's a feeling associated with that. And that feeling leads to the next link. Yes?
Could you please say the number of the ring?
The number of the link, yes, of course. Okay. Name and form is number 4. Name and form is number 4. Then the 6 sense spheres are number 5. Right? Number 5 are the 6 sense spheres. Number 6 is contact. Number 7 is feeling. Yeah? Yes.
Just to bring you back to the 6 senses.
Yeah.
When we say eye faculty, ear faculty, we're referring to the eye sense sphere.
No. So this is just an example. It's the example. So the eye consciousness is the example. Now here, if we take the ear consciousness, if you take the ear consciousness, now we need to apply it to the ear consciousness. What do we need at the observed object condition for an ear consciousness? Sound, absolutely. Shape and color won't help us. Sound, we need
that
now.
wasn't my question.
That wasn't your question?
No, when we say faculty, sometimes we say eye faculty, ear faculty.
Yes.
We're referring to the second.
Yes. The
Okay.
eye sense faculty, the eye sense sphere, the eye sense power, right? And then in the sense of the ear, it's the ear sense sphere, ear faculty. It's not just this object ear, it's the eardrum, it's the nerve, it's whatever happens in the past in the ear, it's the power of the brain, everything physical responsible for us to be able to hear sound. If you're brain damaged, some people are brain damaged, they cannot hear sound. So all this is responsible. It's the empowering condition. So in the case of the ear sense power, it's whatever is responsible on a physical level. And of course, you must have an immediately preceding condition, which can be any consciousness. Any consciousness must precede this. Okay? Then you have contact in terms of the ears. So you can do this with all the 5 senses, and then the mental consciousness. With the mental consciousness, this is not, you don't need a physical sense power, you don't need anything physical. So then the empowering condition and the immediately preceding condition are the same. You need an object, right? For this, the only thing that's different for mental consciousness is that you don't need something physical. A mental consciousness you have in the formless realm. You don't have a sense consciousness. The other 5 sense consciousnesses you don't have in the formless realm, but you always have a mental consciousness. Because you always have an object, and you always have a former moment of mental consciousness. So when you talk about mental consciousness, the 3 conditions you need are any object that exists. So the observed object condition of a mental consciousness can be anything, existent or non-existent. Anything can be taken to mind. Okay? Then, for the eye sense, for the empowering condition, it's not something physical. It's the moment before, the consciousness which is the moment before. That is the empowering condition. The immediately preceding condition is also the moment before. So they still have different names, but they refer to the same thing when you talk about the mental consciousness. When you talk about the mental consciousness, what is the empowering condition? A former moment of consciousness. What is the immediately preceding condition? A former moment of consciousness. Yeah. So it's really the mental consciousness. Just a second. So the mental consciousness is not that important because our lives are governed by the 5 sense consciousnesses, and then mentally we reflect upon exactly those, right? The shape of a color, the shape of a person, the taste of the smell of a person, the whole picture. So really when we check, it all comes down to objects of our 5 senses. Yes.
I wonder if the way you describe the 12 links are accordingly to the traditional way of painting it, or it's jump, I can't see it from here, but only jumping from,
No, I didn't jump. I didn't jump.
it's,
Exactly the same way.
it's from syndrome.
If I had a...
Because sometimes we had explanation that you jump from that one to that one and to that one, and I never understood why.
I promised to be traditional. So I'm sticking to the traditional approach. Yes, no. This is all I learned. I only learned it the traditional way. There is a way of jumping, but this is for later. There's another way of jumping. But you want the 12 things in one order. We had 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, name and form. Now 5 was 6 sense spheres. 6 was contact. 7 was, and the number is always the same. 7 is feeling. Okay, this part we've done. So you've seen how in the beginning, the 4 we did yesterday was from the point of view, you know, karma is left on consciousness. How is the carrier consciousness? What happens to the consciousness? Then with those ones here today, with, well, in a way, name and form, but not so much name and form, but then number 5, the 6 sense spheres, number 6, contact, number 7, feeling. Here we're looking at, oh, what do we need for a mind to arise? What do we need? You know, and actually to communicate with the world, but moreover, what do we need for our delusions to arise? As a desire-around being, as a human being, as a poodle. So we need those 3. And this is there, it's always been there, not a big deal. This is always there, there's always a mental consciousness, not a big deal, but this needs to develop first. Yeah? Okay, so now we've gotten to feeling. Now we need to again change perspective. Need to change perspective. Okay? Now with feeling, you know, attachment arises, grasping arises. Okay, that's all right, that's generally happening. But now we must go to the time of death. The poodle is about to die. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. It's not neat and clean. It's not that easy. It's not like, oh, one step to the next and you kind of cover a whole life and then the poodle life is over. No. Here you're jumping from the womb, right? The happening that start in the womb, and then you can basically infer the whole life this is happening. There's an object, there's a sense power, there's an immediately preceding condition, there's all types of consciousnesses that arise, they're feeling and we crave them and we want them and there's different reactions. But now we're going to the time of death. Okay, so we had 1, 2, 3, then there was a poodle life starting. Poodle, don't even know how you spell it. Poodle, something like that. Okay, so then 4, name and form. We had name and form. We had 5, 6 sense spheres. We had number 6, contact. Okay, 6 sense spheres. Just to keep you, 6 sense spheres, name and form. Okay, so we had those. And then we had 7, feeling. Okay. This was kind of from the womb point of view, but in general that's also happening. Now, we need to go to the time of death. Because you remember? There was an action, number 2, a compelling action, a projecting karma. So the projecting karma was that of me being born as a human in New Zealand. Right? You remember the example? So the seed is still the seed. Still being there all the time. There's always else happening. Yeah? But the seed is here all this time. The seed has been sitting in the form of a seed. Nothing really happened to it, just lying there dormant. Nothing has happened to it. So, we're still concerned with this. So when is this activated? Okay. So now the poodle's life comes to an end. Okay, so when the poodle now is about to die, certain feelings arise, of course. When we die, what happens? We're very much aware, usually. And even if it's very fast, we do feel that the consciousness leaves the body. I mean, oftentimes, if we're aware of like elderly people passing away, they sometimes know when their time has come. You know, I think with my grandmother, she called people before that. And it's almost like she was, kind of, it was closing in. And she seemed to know, and she called her relatives, and that was the last time they saw her, and very briefly after that she passed. So there's stages of death that are described, and they're very much described in the scriptures, because it's so important to be aware of death. And so in those stages, you definitely have a feeling that you're going to die. So there's feeling, yeah? But this feeling, there's definitely, when death approaches closer and closer, so that's when it becomes very important to keep your mind very virtuous. But however virtuous you keep it, as long as we have ignorance, as long as we have a mind that grasps of the self to exist in a certain way, we can't help it. But there be a moment where we go, oh my God, I'm going to lose myself. A fear of losing myself, a fear of, of extinction. And this is the similar fear that I talked about when you realize emptiness, when you come to understanding, or when you realize a coarser level of understanding of emptiness and how you really exist, fear can arise because of the strong attachment. So when we're about to die, of course, there's nothing about realizing the self whatsoever. I mean, most people don't even think about it. But there's a fear of the extinction of the I, which leads to very strong grasping. So first there's an attachment to the I. And that attachment is enhanced by grasping. Okay, so what are those? 8, attachment. So it's the feeling, feeling the displeasure of dying, basically. And however pleasurable and happy we felt before, when the mind becomes subtler, we can't help it, such as our predicament, as being in cyclic existence, in being controlled by ignorance. We can't help it that there's a feeling, number 7, of suffering, like I'm losing myself. And attachment sets in. And then this attachment grows into grasping. It's enhanced by grasping.